I have stumbled upon a place in the United States that I am ashamed to admit I had never heard of before. And as somebody who loves history, I'm actually quite disappointed in myself. This was the site where a young George Washington fought for the King of Britain 20 years before he led a revolution against him. The irony is not lost on me. It's called Fort Necessity. Tucked away in Farmington, Pennsylvania, Washington came here as a young officer in the Virginia militia, serving King George II. The colonies depended on Britain for protection and trade, and the French were pushing into the same Ohio Valley. For Washington and his fellow colonists, defending the Crown territory meant defending home. But less than 20 years later, the same man who once fought for the king would lead the Continental Army against him, breaking Britain's grip on North America and changing the course of history. And it all began here, in this muddy meadow. Fort Necessity, the place where George Washington's military career started, not with triumph, but with defeat. And another ironic detail about this place is the slogan stamped across the souvenirs in the gift shop. The mug I'm holding in my thumbnail reads "Join or Die," and there's an interesting story behind that. Back in the early 1750s, both Britain and France laid claim to the rich Ohio River Valley. The French pushed south from Canada, building forts to secure a corridor stretching from Canada to Louisiana. Virginia's governor, Robert Dinwiddie, feared Britain's claims would be cut off, so he sent a 22-year-old George Washington to warn the French to withdraw or be forced out. Washington first delivered the message in 1753, but the French refused. When he returned in 1754, it was no longer diplomacy. Now a lieutenant colonel, Washington led his men to secure the region for Britain. And this is where my mug connects to the story. If you visit Fort Necessity today, you'll see mugs and magnets stamped with "Join or Die" and the image of a segmented snake. That image comes from Benjamin Franklin's famous 1754 political cartoon, published the very year Washington was here. Franklin used the chopped up snake to urge the colonies to unite with Britain against the French threat. Ironically, 2 decades later, the same slogan would be revived, this time urging unity against Britain during the Revolution. As for Fort Necessity itself, the name says it all. Washington built it out of desperation. After a skirmish gone wrong, he knew French retaliation was inevitable. With the help of his native ally, the half-king of the Mingo, Washington's men ambushed a small French party before dawn, killing their commander and several others. The French later insisted that they had been on a diplomatic mission and denounced the attack as an assassination. Later accounts describe it as a skirmish, but Washington knew a much larger French force was now on its way. Pulling back to the Great Meadows, he hastily threw up a circular stockade that he named Fort Necessity. It was built out of desperation. The design was weak, a low palisade with shallow trenches in an open field, surrounded by woods that gave the enemy perfect cover. On July 3rd, about 600 French soldiers and more than 100 native warriors advanced. They were led by French commander Louis Coulon de Villiers, the brother of the officer killed at Jumonville Glen. From the woods, the French and their native allies poured fire into Washington's exposed men. Trenches flooded, gunpowder soaked, casualties mounted. By evening, Fort Necessity could not hold. The French commander offered terms, and Washington accepted, agreeing to withdraw to Virginia. The surrender document, written in French, included a clause describing the death of the French officer as an assassination. Washington later said he never meant to admit to murder, but the French used the wording to portray Britain as the aggressor. The British troops were allowed to leave with their weapons, flags, and supplies, but once they marched out, the French burnt the fort to the ground. What we see here today is a replica. The French hoped Britain would now abandon its claims to the Ohio country. Instead, London planned major expeditions to drive the French from their strongholds. This one muddy skirmish set off a chain reaction. Britain's determination to avenge the loss at Fort Necessity ignited the French and Indian War, the North American front of the global 7 Years' War, a conflict Washington also served in. Although his first battle ended in surrender, Washington returned to the fight with the Virginia Regiment, rose to colonel, and by 1758 was considered one of the most experienced officers in the colonies. That year, he resigned his commission, stepping back from military life to focus on his estate and local politics. The war itself dragged on until 1763, and its consequences spread far beyond him. Britain had won vast new territories, but the victory came with crushing debt. To pay for the war and defend its expanded empire, Parliament imposed new taxes on the colonies. Those taxes on paper, tea, and everyday goods were just the tip of the iceberg. Behind them was a global empire in debt, a fight over representation, and a growing sense that the colonies were being treated less like citizens and more like cash cows. That tension ultimately exploded into revolution, the very one Washington would one day lead. So the very war Washington fought for the king now helped create the crisis that pushed him to lead the revolution against the same king. And that's what makes this quiet little meadow so deeply ironic. Of course, there was far more than Fort Necessity and the 7 Years' War that led to the revolution. But this battlefield played a key part in setting the story in motion. Washington's defeat here fed directly into the French and Indian War, the North American front of what soon became the global 7 Years' War, which directly contributed to the American Revolution. History is full of quiet places with big stories. If you want to discover more of them with me, please make sure you've hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you think I should go next.